Welcome to Biologica. I'm Dr. Susan, a veterinarian and a marine educator from Maine. On this show, we'll be exploring the many ways that animals and humans interact and that society and nature intersect. Please visit my Patreon or my Podbean page to support the show or to suggest future episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the episode today. Thanks for listening. I love peeper season. Here in Maine, we're in the thick of peeper season, and here is a recording I made just the other day while pulling over on the side of the road. The peeper is a small frog from the U.S. and Canada, known for its springtime mating call. It's actually pretty cool. It produces an antifreeze that it circulates in its blood during the wintertime in the northern part of its range, where it goes into a dormant state, and the antifreeze protects it from freezing. Tonight's episode of Biologica will be about Big Night in Maine. I'm really looking forward to this episode because I've been a long-term fan of the phenomenon called Big Night. The very first time I heard about it was in graduate school, but I experienced it in a different way as a child, which I'll tell that story later. I first heard about Big Night in graduate school. I was on a walk in the campus farm at University of Maine, going past some wetlands and ponds, and my friend Pam, who was getting her PhD in behavior in the biology department, Pam was specifically very interested in amphibians, told me about the phenomenon called Big Night. I was really fascinated and intrigued by this idea where in certain nights in the spring, when the conditions are just right, the night is dark, the roads are wet and it's rainy, and the temperatures are getting warm, the amphibians suddenly rise up and converge on vernal pools. Vernal pools are temporary springtime pools of water in the woods or in the fields that then later dry up, but they're a very popular breeding ground for amphibians. And Pam described that people would communicate with each other and all go out on certain nights to witness this amphibian reproduction phenomenon. In tonight's episode, we'll explore Big Night from a couple different angles. We'll hear from literature ranging from a children's book to a Mary Oliver poem. We'll hear some recordings that were made live out in the field during a big night, exploring and looking for amphibians crossing the road. We'll hear a really interesting interview with the executive director of the nonprofit Maine Big Night. To get things started tonight, we'll hear an excerpt from a children's book called Big Night for Salamanders by Sarah Lamstein. It's an out-of-print book, but worth checking out from the library, especially if you have children. When my daughters were in elementary school, we signed this book out from the library and it got us really inspired about and interested in Big Night. It reminded me of the conversation I had had back in graduate school and inspired my daughter and I to find a nonprofit to go out and experience Big Night with. Here is the excerpt from the book. Hidden in darkness under dripping brush, salamanders creep down the hill, away from their secret forest home, following the scents that they remember, toward the pool where they were born. Across the road and through the trees, raindrops plash into a vernal pool. Filled in spring with rainwater and melting snow, here salamanders breed. Next, we're going to hear a recording when my daughter and I were out at our local site that we survey for Maine Big Night. here in Cumberland, Maine, looking on a rainy spring night for amphibians that might need help, and also collecting data about what we see there. Sky, can you tell me what you're doing right now?
I'm carrying a pregnant peeper to the side of the road. There she goes.
It's got a really big belly.
Oh,
Oh, and there's a mouse. Okay.
Can I have my flashlight?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So under notes, maybe we should note that it looked pregnant. So live peeper. Notes. One peeper looked pregnant. If you can say pregnant for amphibians, at least full of eggs. Fecund.
That's another unidentifiable dead.
Another unidentifiable dead. Okay. Here, there's a car coming. Let's move back. Unidentifiable dead. Probably a peeper, but we'll mark it as...
No, it looks too big.
Oh, okay. An alive one? Wow, that one's lucky because a car just went past really fast.
All right, up.
Okay, I'm going to mark the car too. It is the first warm, wet night of year. It was mild, yes, but very early. There was still snow on the ground on the sides. Now the snow has melted. Another live peeper. Okie dokie.
Oh, another one. Jeez.
Oh, wow, they're popping out. Another live spring peeper. And you had 2 more dead unidentified, right? I marked those. No cars coming. 2 more dead right there, actually. This one's lucky you found it. Another car passing. You're just trying to stay on your hand, huh?
Yeah.
There he went. Okay, 2 more dead.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. I'll go over here. I'd love to see another spotted salamander. That was really cool. Wait, I think I see one. Here, I'll shine the light. Is it a peeper?
Yeah.
Little X on the back.
Oh, my hands.
You got it.
This one's really trying to get out.
Really active.
Yeah.
I feel like we're having another little wave of them or something.
Oh, I thought that was a salamander for a sec, but it's just... Alright, nope, wrong way. We're going that way.
There you go. Good job, buddy.
They're so funny when they jump. They're like starfish for a second.
It was funny the few we saw earlier this year when there was still snow on the ground and they would just sit there like
Didn't want to get off my hand.
not wanting to leave the warmth of your hand.
That's another dead.
Another dead. Okay, so you had the live spring peeper and then 1 more dead. Okay. All right, we're getting some action. I'm going to sign off here. You probably heard in that excerpt that salamanders needed to cross the road to get to the vernal pool. And herein lies the conundrum of Big Night. Unfortunately, now in the modern era of automobiles and busy highways, the idea of amphibians converging to move en masse to their vernal pools runs smack into modern society. Many of you are probably familiar with the old 1980s video game Frogger, where the little frog needs to be navigated carefully across the road between oncoming cars and trucks to avoid being splatted on the pavement. And unfortunately, for modern salamanders and frogs, the journey during Big Night to their vernal pools is not that much unlike the old game Frogger. Enter stage left a diverse cast of individuals from grassroots organizations, from land trusts to Audubon groups, to school groups and community groups, to the organization we're going to be learning about tonight, Maine Big Night. And these people go out with their identification cards and their flashlights and their reflective safety vests on warm, rainy, often foggy or misty spring nights, and look on the roads for amphibians that need to be chauffeured, given a little extra boost across the road. And in some cases, these groups and organizations are collecting some data and helping with some scientific research as well, which we'll learn about tonight. In just a moment, you'll get to meet the director of Maine Big Night, a growing and vibrant organization that is not only helping amphibians cross the street, but is collecting citizen science data about what amphibians are found, what species and how many, which ones are alive, dead, or injured, how many cars pass that night, what the temperature is, what the weather's like, and so on. And all of this data is being collected from all around Maine. We are going to be speaking with the person who is the executive director and started the whole organization in the beginning. I'm here with Greg LeClair, the executive director of Maine Big Night. Greg, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. I have a couple questions, and then anything you want to add in is totally welcome. Greg is the executive director of Maine Big Night, which has been growing rapidly. Could you tell us a little bit about the origin story of Maine Big Night, how it came about in the first place, and sort of how that's developing?
Yeah, so the origin of Maine Big Night as the organization actually reaches all the way back to when I was a kid, probably when I was around 7 years old, and I found my first spotted salamander in my family's driveway where we had just come home from an outing, and it was this warm, rainy night in April. And as we were walking to our front door, there was just this massive, like 8 or 9 inch long spotted salamander right there in front of my door. And at that point, I had already known that I wanted to study wildlife or work with wildlife somehow. I was already kind of like, really into animals. But I'd never seen this before. And had kind of assumed that like that kind of animal wouldn't even, live in my backyard, but, here it was. So that inspired me to look for more of these guys anytime that it was, a warm, rainy night in spring, and I would look around on my driveway or maybe like poke around in my family's gardens. But it turned out it was a lot easier to cover more ground and see them if you were on the road. So I would make my parents drive me every now and then so I could see if we could find any more amphibians. And I remember doing this all the way up through high school.
Nice.
And then
thank you to Greg's parents.
Yes, thank you to my mother and father for their patience with this. But I mean, they certainly, I think, were very supportive of this sort of thing anyway. I mean, my dad was an outdoorsman and my mother was a gardener. So I got two very different but very important views of the natural world. And then, enter college. I'm doing this on my own at this point where I'm driving around on these warm, rainy nights in spring. And I sometimes would take friends with me. And I was part of the herpetology club and the wildlife club at my school. And we had organized like a few kind of informal outings to go see how many we could see. And, at this point, I'm realizing that I really like conservation biology and I really want to do something greater. And I had always thought like maybe there's an organized way that we could do this and like we can get people out there helping these guys at these really high impact points, because it seems like everybody knows of like a spot where there's like a ton of frogs or salamanders crossing a road in a certain area. But so it took until my senior year of college where I finally kind of got the guts, so to speak, to try and see if I could make an organized effort out of this. And I just brought out about a dozen college students and a few professors, and we had a camera crew from a local news organization, and we barely got anything, and we only checked a few sites, but it was enough for me to think, okay, like I'll try this again next year. And I made it a little bit bigger, and I've just been kind of adding on to it more and more. And so 2018 was our first official year, but so much has changed since then, and we've just grown so much.
Yeah, it seems like it's really grown in amazing ways and such a great focal point for so many citizen scientists and interested people to rally around and get involved. It's so cool that that's the story that a salamander showed up in the very origin in your yard or driveway and sort of invited you to get involved.
Yes, yeah, that salamander was an invitation from the future.
Nice. Just to share very quickly, my daughter and I started going to Big Night with an organization that just had an educational outing one night a year up in Bridgeton area. And when COVID happened, they stopped doing that. And we were looking for a new way to get involved, which is when we found Maine Big Night. And it was so exciting for us because in addition to getting to take some action, there's the citizen science and data collecting aspect of it.
hmm
And that just feels so cool because we get to know a place over time. And even a night that we go out that's quiet, it's still data, it's still information.
hmm
Um, what what do you and Maine Big Night do currently or envision doing with the data that the citizen scientists are helping to collect?
Well, the ultimate goal is something that can result in long-term conservation for these guys. So Maine doesn't have any endangered amphibians, but as a whole, amphibians are not doing well worldwide.
Hmm.
And even some of our common species are declining a little bit. So we hope to use this data to inform smarter infrastructure methods. So, next time this road gets ripped up, could we put a tunnel under this road, or could we change our road salting regime on this road? Anything along those lines. And we're pushing for this right now in a few key spots around the state to see if we can get these like pilot structures put in.
Hmm. That's really exciting. And I think I read somewhere that Maine Big Night, the organization, is the first statewide organized
Mhm.
organization. Have you had people from other organizations or states talking with you or getting inspired from what you and the organization are doing?
Yeah, plenty. So Maine Big Night is not the first Big Night organization, but it is definitely the first statewide organization.
Hmm.
So we've taken inspiration from those other organizations out there already, and we just kind of scaled it up. And there have been others that have reached out hoping to scale up as well, mostly in the Northeast. But I mean, there's Big Night programs now in almost every Eastern U.S. state and even some of the Western states as well, like California.
I love that. It's kind of a grassroots movement and that's building up, and Maine Big Night is a really cool example of that. Um, can you share with us one of your favorite stories from out on the streets with Maine Big Night? Something about that you saw with a volunteer or with an animal that you encountered?
Oh man, there are so many things that I think I
I
could
bet
answer with
it's kind of a
that.
hard question.
It could be anything from like seeing owls on these nights to seeing like unique behaviors of some of these amphibians. But I think the ones that are most inspiring to me are when we're out there. It's a very vulnerable experience because you're out in the middle of this road in the middle of the night, and conditions aren't great, and you kind of have this feeling that like when people are driving by, they might be looking at you weird, or
Hmm.
some of them might be thinking you're up to no good, and it just like it feels like you're like in this particular vulnerable stance. But frequently I'm proved wrong that people passing by are actually really excited about you. And I think
Mm.
one of the best examples of that was when I used to survey out in a very rural location. I had a huge pickup truck roll up on me, and
Hmm.
he had slowed down, and I knew that he was going to ask me like, oh, did I hit a deer, or maybe like, are you guys crazy? Like, why are you guys out here? And he leans out the window, and he's got his lip packed full of tobacco, and he's
Hmm.
like, are you guys finding salamanders? And
Nice.
yeah, I was like, yeah, we are. Do you want to see one? And I got to show him a spotted salamander, and
That's
it was a
awesome.
very like unexpected experience, I guess, and I really appreciated that. And my experience just throughout this project has been that people care about this way more than I thought they would, of all backgrounds too. So it's been really reassuring.
Yeah, I've met people all ages and all sort of experience levels coming to join us on our site, and I bet that just is, um, much broader intersection that you've been having with all kinds of people. I love that story.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Can you tell us about Leona? Is it Leona? Leona and
Yes,
her
Leona.
story?
Yes, so Leona is a spotted salamander, and she came to me in, let's see, I think it was October or November of last year, so pretty late into the fall season. And I don't do wildlife rehab, but this opportunity kind of came to me where, first of all, you don't need permits to have a spotted salamander under your care. And
Hmm.
usually I don't encourage people to keep amphibians and reptiles as much as possible,
Hmm.
at least wild ones, just because I like to keep wild things wild. But so she came to me as an injured animal. Somebody had posted about her on our Facebook page, and we had hypothesized that she had just barely survived a turkey attack
Wow.
because turkeys love to eat salamanders, but she was,
Mm.
a relatively big one, and a turkey would have to work pretty hard to swallow her. But, turkeys, they might thrash you around, or if there's multiple birds, you might be really getting pecked at.
I'm having a
So,
whole new perspective on turkeys right now. I love it.
yeah, turkeys are a little bit more gruesome, I guess, than we might think. But uh, yeah, so she had a broken spine. She was stuck in this like permanent C shape, and her rear legs were not functional, and she had been left out for a little while. So she had some major damage to her skin from the sun and the
Mm.
drying. She was like shedding massive amounts of skin, which is really abnormal to see for a salamander.
Hmm.
So I brought her in, and I had heard, and it was at least aware of the fact that species in this genus, Ambystoma, which include the axolotls,
Mm.
are supremely capable of healing themselves. They can regrow entire limbs, including bone and nervous
Wow.
tissue and blood vessels, even parts of vital organs. So I thought maybe this girl would have a chance. And as far as I can tell, there's nothing in scientific literature confirming that spotted salamanders can regenerate something this major. So, I
Mm.
mean, she had a broken spine, no doubt about it. Like she could not move her rear
Right.
portion of her body. So I thought, maybe with some time she might be able to heal, and I would learn something really important about these guys.
Hmm.
So fast forward about 2 months, she had fully healed, gained full mobility, almost doubled her weight, and was
Wow.
just thriving. So she spent the winter hanging out in my room, and then we just released her this past week. So she's hopefully out there having lots of babies and having a second chance at life.
That's incredible. It's first a cool story about an individual salamander that made it back out there and sort of, I'm sure as a big female, she's probably able to contribute a lot in terms of reproduction, but
Oh, I hope.
also just the opportunity for you and through your experience, all of us to learn about the regeneration capabilities is super cool.
Oh, yeah.
So good luck to Leona and thinking about her out there in the vernal pools right now. Um, Last of all, what is the favorite part, and if you'd like to share the most challenging part of your job with Maine Big Night?
My favorite part is when I get to actually see the volunteers and be out there and interact with everybody. Doing presentations is always fun too, but it certainly comes with a lot of work. I mean, this is not my actual job. This is something that I run in the background of my other work.
Mm, mm-hmm.
People assumed that this is what I did my PhD on, but it is not. I did a separate
Mm,
PhD while doing this
wow.
in the background as well. And
That
so
I
it's,
was assuming that. That's really interesting.
yeah,
You're
my
busy.
PhD was in conservation genetics. So,
Oh, cool. Hmm.
very different field, but yeah, it's just how busy it can get. I mean, a few weeks ago we had over 500 emails over the course of 2 or 3 days, and just keeping up with that. We have an intern now that helps, but even
Mm,
with an intern, we still get buried. So, I spend many hours a day. Come home from work, and then I'll spend quite a while at home catching up on emails or signing sites out to people, answering questions, and that stuff definitely gets very exhausting. But when amphibians finally start flying and you can get out there and interact with people who are involved in the project, it's like, okay, this is real. It's not just answering emails in my inbox. It's a real thing.
That's really cool. And also super impressive. And thank you, because this is such a cool organization. And I had no idea you were sort of moonlighting with it. But I guess they're out in the moonlight, or the nighttime. So that's kind of fitting. And thank you for doing this interview, because I know we're right in the thick of Big Night right now with the springtime and the warm rain. So I know this is your busy time of year. So thank you for chatting with me today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for hosting me, and I really appreciate it.
This was really cool. I really enjoyed it, and I know other people will love hearing your stories. And good luck with the rest of the Big Night season.
Thank you so much, Susan.
I really enjoyed my chance to talk with Greg LeClair and got to learn some really interesting things that I didn't know about him and the organization I've been volunteering for since the start of the whole COVID quarantine time. So in honor of the salamander Leona, here is a song written and performed by Will Sings Songs. And thank you to Will for giving us permission to use this song.
I was walking through the woods one day. I flipped a log wet with rain. You won't believe what I found. Wriggling there on the ground, it was a salamander, 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 salamander. Salamander, 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 salamander. The salamander looked up at me. To them, I was as big as a tree. Other critters would have been scared. The salamander just smiled and stared, because salamanders, 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 salamanders. Salamanders, 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 salamanders aren't scared of anything. But some people think that manders are icky. They think they're gross with skin all sticky, but they're not slimy, they're just wet. If you met one, you'd love it, I bet, because they're smiley, not slimy. Salamanders, 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 they're smiley, not slimy. Salamanders, 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 salamanders.
I loved that song from the moment I first heard it, and for the amphibian lovers out there, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll link to Will Sing Songs site in the episode notes, and thank you again to Will for the use of that song. Next, we're going to go back out into the field on that rainy, warm spring night recently where Sky and I were out looking for amphibians to help them cross the road.
He's bled. Oh my gosh.
All right, we found our first spotted salamander of the year. He's got a injured tail, but you know what? His legs and main part of his body look really good, and they can regenerate sometimes. Okay. Should we get him sort of off the road a bit?
Here?
Maybe, yeah, maybe there.
All right, you little spotty.
Let's make sure he can sort of walk okay. What do you say, bud?
Is this right here? All right, buddy, come on.
After learning the story earlier about Leona from Big Night and Greg LeClair, I feel all the more hopeful that that injured salamander that Sky and I found with an injured tail but that was able to walk is out there reproducing in the vernal pools and living its best life this spring. So good luck to that salamander. I thought it might be fun to highlight one recent piece of research, and this is from 2017, called The Darker the Night, the Brighter the Stars, Consequences of Nocturnal Brightness on Amphibian Reproduction. This paper looked at the effects of the moon on amphibian organisms, in particular, in this case, tree frogs. And what they found was that, amongst other things, the egg-laying activity picked up a lot with a clear preference for dark nights, and this related to both the weather condition and the moon phases. There were some other details in there about how the moon and environmental light affected the behavior of tree frogs. And I love this sentence at the end of their abstract. We speculate that the evolution of behaviors involving a trade-off between activity and safety could be behind the, quote, moonlight phobia showed by the studied tree frog. I really love the phrase moonlight phobia, and it's kind of cool to picture it. They talked a little bit about how sometimes a little bit of moonlight could be helpful for spotting other salamanders, but it also created more risk from predators, and so there was a little bit of a trade-off there. And the ultimate outcome was that generally they had a bit of a phobia of moonlight. Pretty cool research. We'll have one more journey out on the streets with Sky and me, where you can experience what it's like to be out volunteering on a big night. In the meantime, please visit mainebignight.org, where you can learn more, support the organization, or maybe even sign up to volunteer. With that, I'm going to head back out onto the streets with Sky and me for a final outing where we're going to discover something pretty cool. I do have a segment where it seems very quiet and empty for a while, and I'm leaving that in there on purpose because I want people to experience what it's like to be out with the mist and the rain in the dark and quiet with the amphibians all around. So bear with that little section that's quiet, and maybe if you're not driving, just close your eyes and imagine being out at night. Sometimes it looks terrible through a window on a rainy night, but then when you get out there in a raincoat, it actually is kind of peaceful and special. After this segment out on the streets with my daughter and me, we'll finish with a Mary Oliver poem and wrap up. It's 10:15 at night, and we have found 19 live peepers that we've moved across the street. One injured peeper. It had a little scrape on its lip area. 23 dead peepers. One live spotted salamander. One injured spotted salamander. It had an injured tail. And sadly, 4 dead spotted salamanders. We've seen 16 cars go past. But they're slowing down, which is good because there's still some peepers crossing, but we might go home soon. But I think we're in a good place because the traffic is slowing down for the night. Here you can hear the peepers in the woods next to us. It's sort of a misty night out here. There actually might be a mix of calls there. We are tired and thirsty, but we did good work.
Yes, we did.
All right, Sky, what's your favorite thing about coming out to Big Night?
Oh,
Oh, wow! A live spotted salamander. It's so beautiful. Right in the middle of the road. Right as we were about to finish for the night. Oh my gosh. That is beautiful.
It looks like small too. Maybe it's like a juvenile.
Wow. Should I get a picture of it? Insert here a brief photo session with the salamander once it was safely out of harm's way. What a beautiful salamander. Hanging out here. We've This guy just moved it to the side of the road. Bright yellow spots on a dark bluish brown back. Cars just going by. Oh, that's a beautiful bud. What a good way to end the evening. And then the car going by to symbolize why we are out here. There's all kinds of ways to help amphibians, and a lot of that has to do with trying not to put toxins, pesticides, fertilizers, salts in the waterways. But helping them cross the road is one way we can help. Okay, signing off on Big Night. Want to say good night?
Good night.
Good night. I mentioned early on that one of my very first experiences with Big Night was as a child, and this is a very different kind of memory. I'll describe it very briefly because it's a little bit sad, but I have a very clear memory of driving in the back seat of the car. Of course, no seatbelts because this was the 1970s, at night through some low-lying wetland areas of Indiana near a beloved childhood locale called Lake Tippecanoe. And I remember the scene through blurry eyesight because I was just crying and crying. The roads were covered in hundreds of bright green frogs, and the rain was pitter-pattering on the streets, and we were just driving slowly. We couldn't go back or forward without hitting frogs. The road was just carpeted with frogs, and it was just very sad as a child to see that. So I always remember that, and I kind of, when we're out there going ahead and helping frogs cross the road, it's a little bit like I'm my childhood self out there trying to do a little bit of my part in helping. We're going to wind up with a Mary Oliver poem, and I was lucky enough to hear Mary Oliver speak, I guess maybe the number of years back, and she talked about how she was suffering from some anxiety and had some trouble leaving her home setting, and one of the ways she handled that was to walk every single day around the property at her place, around a pond and some woods, the same pond and woods, and get to know them intimately, but that she didn't go beyond that space with her poetry or herself very often. And a shout out to Mary Oliver for her wonderful poetry where she intimately got to know those woods and that pond. And so we'll wind up with a poem about springtime and frogs by Mary Oliver. April by Mary Oliver. I wanted to speak at length about the happiness of my body and the delight of my mind, for it was April, a night, a full moon, but something in myself, for maybe from somewhere or other, said, "Not too many words, please, in the muddy shallows the frogs are singing." This is from Swan, Poems and Prose Poems by Beacon Press. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and stayed with me here for this episode about Big Night. Thank you also to Greg LeClair and to Will Sing Songs for their contributions to tonight's episode. Go ahead and hit like or follow if you enjoyed today's episode. The next episode will be about springtime bird watching. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.